She sleeps on you every single night. But the moment you reach out to pet her, she dodges, hisses, walks away. Sound familiar? You look at the furry creature sleeping beside you and think, this is proof of love. Then you try to pet her and get a cold rejection. Millions of cat owners run into this paradox every day, and they draw the wrong conclusion from it. They think their cat merely tolerates them, uses them as a heat source, allows herself to be nearby out of politeness, but nothing more. She was just lying right there, so what happened? The real reason is something else entirely. And it's far more touching than it first appears. I'll explain everything now, and after this video, you'll look at every sleeping cat beside you in a completely different way. Watch closely. There she is, curling up at your feet, getting comfortable, closing her eyes. Her breathing evens out, her body is fully relaxed. She's in a deep sleep, and you can see it in every detail. Twitching whiskers, relaxed paws, the steady rise and fall of her side. Now you slowly, as carefully as possible, reach out your hand to pet her. It seems like the perfect moment. She's calm, she's close, she's yours. But the instant your fingers touch her fur, something changes. Her body tenses, her eyes snap open. And now she's already jumping up, leaping away, or simply walking off in silence, leaving you utterly puzzled with your hand still hanging in the air. A familiar scene, right? You've probably seen it many times, and every time you've asked yourself the same question. Why? Why does she choose to sleep right next to you if the very next second she rejects any contact? It looks like a contradiction, as if the cat simultaneously wants to be close to you and doesn't want to be touched. But what if I told you there's no contradiction here at all? What if both of these behaviors are part of the very same story about trust, a story hardly anyone stops to think about? So here's what you're probably thinking at this point. She lets me be near her, but nothing more. She tolerates me because I'm a source of food and warmth. She doesn't love me as much as I love her, otherwise why wouldn't she let me pet her? That's a logical conclusion. It seems obvious. And almost every cat owner eventually arrives at exactly this conclusion. But here's the thing. This conclusion is completely wrong. What's actually happening is the exact opposite of what you think. What looks like rejection is in fact one of the strongest displays of trust a cat is capable of. It's not that she doesn't love you. It's that you're misreading the signals she's sending you. And once you understand the real logic behind her behavior, you'll stop seeing coldness in it and start seeing something entirely different, a deep, almost vulnerable form of attachment that she demonstrates to you every single night simply by lying down beside you. And this isn't just my speculation or a comforting theory. It's backed by research on cat behavior conducted by animal psychologists and ethologists, specialists in the science of animal behavior in natural settings. Scientists have spent years observing domestic cats and their wild relatives, studying how trust forms between a cat and a human, and why sleep plays such a special role in that process. It turns out that where a cat chooses to sleep is far from random and far from a matter of mere comfort. It's a conscious, instinctive decision, rooted in deep survival mechanisms hardwired into the species, whether it's a house cat or its wild ancestor somewhere out on the savannah. And once you understand what's behind that choice, the whole picture changes. An ordinary domestic scene, a cat curled up next to you, turns into something far more meaningful. Into a small but very eloquent act of trust that she performs again and again every night without a single word. Now let's figure out exactly what's behind that choice. Let's go through, one by one, all the explanations that usually come to mind and see why none of them holds up. First theory. The cat sleeps next to you simply because it's warm there. Makes sense, right? Cats love warmth, and a human body is a great heat source, especially in winter. But here's the problem. If it were only about temperature, the cat could just as easily settle on a radiator, on a windowsill in the sun, on a warm blanket across the room. She has dozens of alternative heat sources that don't require any risk, while sleeping next to a human is a risk, and we'll come back to that. Second theory, the cat sleeps next to you because she simply has nowhere else to go. That doesn't hold up either in most apartments and houses. A cat has plenty of options. A couch, an armchair, a windowsill, her own bed, a closet, even the floor. She chooses you specifically, not because there's no alternative, but because this option is the one she prefers over all the others. Third theory, the most hurtful one, the cat tolerates you because you feed her, and this is a kind of payment for food. But here, science firmly disagrees. Research shows that cats form genuine emotional attachments to their humans, rather than simply associating them with a food bowl. This isn't just a Pavlovian reflex. So what's left if none of the everyday explanations account for what's happening? What's left is the one explanation that actually has serious biological grounding, and it has nothing to do with warmth, laziness, or food. It has to do with what happens to a cat the moment she falls asleep, and why sleep, for any mid-sized predator, isn't a relaxed, harmless state at all, but rather the moment when she's completely defenseless. And it's precisely this fact, not habit, not comfort, that determines where and next to whom a cat decides to close her eyes. To understand why sleep isn't just rest for a cat, we need to set aside the couch, the blanket, and the cozy apartment for a moment, and remember what a cat actually is from a biological standpoint. A domestic cat is a predator, small, compact, but a genuine predator with all the instincts inherited from her wild ancestors. And here's the important part. In the natural world, a mid-sized predator is simultaneously a hunter and prey. A cat is big enough to hunt rodents and birds, but small enough to become prey herself for a larger predator, a fox, a coyote, a bird of prey, and once upon a time, larger wildcats too. And this is where the crucial part begins. When any animal falls asleep, it loses control. It can't see what's happening around it, it can't hear danger as clearly as when awake, it can't react instantly if something goes wrong. Muscles are relaxed, reactions are slowed, senses are dulled. For a wild animal, this is the single most vulnerable moment of the entire day, the moment when it's easiest to catch off guard and kill. That's exactly why, in the wild, animals never sleep just anywhere. They seek shelter, a den, a hollow, dense brush, any spot where the risk of attack is minimal. And that rule hasn't disappeared just because a cat now lives in an apartment with central heating and 2 meals a day. An instinct shaped by millions of years of evolution hasn't gone anywhere, it's simply looking for a new outlet in modern conditions. And this brings us to the key fact this whole explanation has been building toward. In the wild, a cat will never, under any circumstances, lie down to sleep next to something she perceives as a threat. That sounds simple, but this is where the whole point lies. Picture a wild cat somewhere out in the savannah or the forest. Nearby wanders some unfamiliar large creature, a potential predator. Will she fall asleep a couple of meters away from it? Never. Her self-preservation instinct simply won't allow it, even if the creature is behaving peacefully, even if it shows no aggression at all. The cost of a mistake is too high, and a mistake here could cost her life. A wild cat will choose the safest, most hidden, most inaccessible spot to sleep, and will avoid any large creature whose intentions aren't fully clear to her. So this instinct doesn't switch off just because a cat now lives in a warm apartment and eats from a bowl twice a day. It remains just as sharp as it was thousands of years ago. And that means only one thing. If your house cat lies down to sleep next to you, voluntarily, without any coercion, night after night from the standpoint of her ancient instincts, something extraordinary is happening. Something that simply couldn't happen if she saw you as a threat. And so we arrive at the main conclusion of the first part. If sleep is the moment of maximum vulnerability, if no animal in the wild will sleep next to a potential threat, and if this instinct is still alive in every house cat, despite the couch, the blanket, and the food bowl, then what does it mean that your cat chooses to fall asleep right next to you? It means one thing only. On the level of deep, ancient instincts that cannot be faked or performed, your cat has made a decision. She is safe with you. She doesn't fear that you'll hurt her while she's defenseless. She doesn't consider you a threat to stay wary of or keep her distance from. And this isn't just habit or coincidence. It's an active, instinctive choice she makes again and again. Put simply, sleeping next to you is nothing less than the highest form of trust a cat is capable of. She physically cannot give you a clearer signal of her attachment. Alright, you might say, that explains a lot. But then an even more important question arises. If the cat trusts me so much that she's willing to sleep next to me, completely defenseless, why won't she let me pet her in that very moment? Shouldn't trust mean the opposite, that it's safe to touch her, to stroke her, to be affectionate? At first glance, this really does look like a contradiction. On one hand, profound trust, expressed by the very fact that she sleeps next to you. On the other hand, a sharp, almost aggressive refusal of contact in the very moment when, seemingly, everything calls for tenderness. This inconsistency confuses most cat owners, and it's exactly what most often pushes people toward the wrong conclusions about their pet's character. Some decide the cat is just moody. Others think she's unpredictable, or even a bit strange in how she expresses affection. But in reality, there's no contradiction here at all. There's just one detail most people overlook. Trust to sleep nearby and readiness for touch in a specific moment are two completely different kinds of trust, operating by different rules. And to truly understand a cat, you need to understand exactly this distinction. To understand this distinction, we need to go back again to what happens to a cat during sleep. Remember, we said, sleep is a state in which an animal loses control of the situation. It can't see, hear, or react as quickly as when it's awake. And here's the key point. While a cat is asleep or in a drowsy half-sleep, she's physically unable to instantly assess what's happening around her. She can't, in a split second, tell whether this touch is affection from a beloved human or the first sign of danger. A brain that has just emerged from sleep simply can't process information at the speed needed for an accurate threat assessment. Now imagine the situation from the cat's point of view. She was asleep, fully relaxed, and vulnerable. And suddenly, an unexpected touch she didn't see coming and couldn't anticipate. In that moment, the ancient instinct fires faster than consciousness can register that the hand belongs to her owner, not a predator. The body reacts before the cat has time to think, oh, it's just my person. That's exactly why the reaction often looks sharp, even startling, flinching, hissing, and instant retreat. But this isn't a rejection of you personally. It's not a sign that she doesn't love you. It's a pure, unprocessed reaction of the ancient self-preservation instinct, firing faster than the cat can control it. To make this even clearer, imagine a similar situation with a human. You're sound asleep at night, fully immersed in sleep, and suddenly someone touches your shoulder or arm sharply, without warning. What happens in that first split second? Your body reacts before your mind does. You flinch, your eyes snap open, you might pull away, or even cry out in surprise. Only a second later, once your consciousness catches up with reality, do you realize, oh, it's just my spouse, my child, or my roommate, there's no danger at all. But that first instinctive reaction has already happened, and there was no way for you to control it. This is exactly what happens with a cat, with one important difference. Her self-preservation instinct is sharper and more ancient, and in the wild, the consequences of a mistake are far more serious than for a human. That's why a cat's reaction to a sudden touch during sleep can be much more pronounced than a simple flinch, and that's completely normal from a biological standpoint. Now that you understand the mechanics of this reaction, it's worth taking a step back and looking at the whole picture. There are two completely different kinds of trust that we often confuse with one another. The first is a general, strategic kind of trust, if you will. It's the cat's willingness to be near you in a state of total vulnerability, because on a deep level, she doesn't consider you a threat. This trust shows up specifically through her choice of where to sleep. The second kind of trust is entirely different. It's readiness for physical contact at a specific moment in time. And this kind of trust requires something completely different from the cat. Awareness, wakefulness, the ability to assess the situation here and now, rather than just a general confidence that you won't harm her. Put simply, a cat can fully trust you overall and still not be ready for touch right this second, because right now, she isn't in control of the situation. This isn't a contradiction in her feelings toward you. It's simply two different mechanisms that switch on at different times, following different rules. And here we arrive at a real moment of insight that changes how you see the whole situation. Think about this. Every time your cat lies down to sleep next to you, she's making a choice. A conscious one, even if largely instinctive, but a choice nonetheless. She could go to another room, climb onto a wardrobe, hide in some secluded corner somewhere no one could disturb or accidentally touch her. But instead, she chooses you. She chooses the spot where the risk of an unwanted touch is objectively higher than in a closed room by herself. And she makes this choice again and again every night, knowing on an instinctive level that a safer, more secluded option exists somewhere nearby. This means that closeness to you matters more to her than an absolute guarantee of not being disturbed. She's willing to accept a certain risk of accidental touch in order to be near you. And at the same time, she retains the right to control exactly when physical contact happens, because full control over her own safety is vital for a mid-sized predator, even one who long ago became a house pet with a food bowl and a favorite blanket. What emerges is a picture that seems paradoxical at first, but is actually very logical. Maximum trust and the need for control aren't contradictory. They coexist beautifully in one furry creature. This is exactly why it's important to draw a clear line between two different conclusions you could draw from the same situation. The first conclusion, the wrong one. My cat won't let me pet her, so she must love me less than I thought, or she just tolerates me. The second conclusion, the right one. My cat's self-preservation instinct simply works this way, and it has nothing to do with the strength of her attachment to me. The difference between these two conclusions is enormous, and it shapes how you'll interpret your pet's behavior going forward. In the first case, you feel hurt, disappointed, maybe you even wonder whether it was worth getting a cat if she's so cold. In the second case, you start seeing not rejection in her behavior, but a subtle, sophisticated biological logic that actually works in your favor. Because once you understand the rules of this game, you can learn to get physical affection from your cat exactly when she herself is ready to give it and to do it the right way. And here it's worth mentioning another interesting fact that explains a lot and often escapes the notice of cat owners. Researchers studying cat behavior have observed a pattern. Cats are far more willing to let themselves be touched in moments when they themselves initiate the contact, rather than the human. Notice how your cat behaves when she approaches you on her own. She rubs against your legs, presents her side, jumps onto your lap, presses her head into your palm, demanding to be petted. In that moment, she's fully awake, fully in control of the situation, and she herself decides when, where, and how the contact happens. And in such moments, a cat almost never reacts sharply or aggressively because there's no element of surprise, no threat of losing control. The difference is fundamental. In one case, the touch happens on the cat's initiative, while she's fully awake and in control. In the other, it happens on the human's initiative, often without warning, sometimes while she's asleep or drowsy. And it's precisely this difference who initiates the contact and what state the cat is in at that moment that determines whether you get purring and pleasure or hissing and an instant retreat to another room. So now that we've worked out the mechanics of this behavior, it makes sense to move from theory to practice. What exactly should you do with this knowledge? The first and most important rule, never touch your cat abruptly while she's asleep or drowsy. However much you might want to pet that peacefully sleeping creature right now, it's better to hold back the urge. Wait until she starts waking up on her own. You'll notice it by a slight twitch of the ears, eyes beginning to open, a stretch. It's precisely in this transitional moment, when the cat has already partly regained control of the situation but is still relaxed after sleep, that the odds of a calm, friendly reaction to touch are significantly higher. Second rule, if you do need to disturb a sleeping cat, say because it's feeding time or you're heading out, do it gradually, not abruptly. Speak to her in a quiet, familiar voice before you touch her. The sound of your voice acts as a kind of warning, a signal saying, "It's me, there's no danger," and gives the cat time to partly emerge from sleep and prepare for contact instead of reacting instinctively and sharply. Third rule, if your cat responds to a touch with a hiss or by walking away, don't take it as a personal insult, and certainly don't punish her or try to hold her down by force. That will only intensify the stress response and can undermine the very trust you're trying to build in the first place. Just give her time to settle, and soon enough, she'll come back to you on her own, fully ready for affection. There's also a flip side to this rule, and it's just as important. Learn to notice the signals a cat uses to invite contact herself. A slow blink when she looks at you and briefly closes her eyes. This is a cat's equivalent of a kiss blown your way, a sign of complete relaxation and trust. A tail held straight up, sometimes with a slight curl at the tip, a signal of a friendly mood and readiness to interact. Rubbing against your legs, presenting her side or her head, a direct invitation to pet her right now. Once you learn to read these signs, you'll start getting affection back from her much more often. Now let's return to where this video began. Remember that scene your cat curling up next to you every night, but the moment you reach out your hand, she dodges away or leaves? Now you're looking at that picture through completely different eyes. This is no longer a story about coldness or rejection. It's a story about trust, quiet, unconditional, needing no words or confirmation. Every time your cat lies down to sleep beside you, she's saying, in her own language, something she can't say any other way. I'm safe with you. And the fact that she isn't always ready for touch in a given moment, that's not about you. And it's not about her feelings. It's about an ancient instinct that protected her wild ancestors for thousands of years and keeps on working, even in the coziest, warmest, safest apartment in the world. Now, I genuinely love to hear about your cat. Tell me in the comments, does she sleep next to you every night, or does she prefer her own spot, a bed, a windowsill, an armchair in another room? Or maybe she's one of those rare cats who happily let themselves be petted even while asleep without flinching in the slightest. Those exist too, and it's interesting in its own way. Share your story. I read every comment and I'll definitely reply to the most interesting ones. And since we've been talking about trust and how to correctly read the signals a cat sends, also tell me, have you noticed your cat doing the slow blink or rubbing against your legs? The things we talked about earlier? It's the best way to check how well you've already learned to read your furry companion's language. Right below, I'm genuinely curious what happens in your homes every night. What happens in your homes every night? What happens in your homes every night?